All right, great. Hey, welcome to the Vermillion Institute. Thank you all for coming. People I recognized before and so on and so forth. So if some of you, it's your first visit here, after I'm done talking or whenever, you're free to look around the whole place. So we'll see. And then you'll have to decide which is your favorite room or space here in the place as well. So, and it's open all the way from the tower down to here. So. But anyway, right, well, I want to get a few things right. I notice here Gene Yeager's here, and he's an expert on local history and everything, so correct me, or any of you, if you have comments or questions. This isn't a formal presentation or anything, so that's good. But I guess I really ought to try to answer your question is, what is, or what was the Vermillion Institute? And let me say, briefly, that it was an institute set up by the people of Vermillion Township to provide for further education beyond just the one-room schools that they had at that time. And it wasn't hugely unusual at that time in that there were plenty of other places. It was sort of between like the primary education, and then it was secondary and post-secondary education, and then it later got a state charter. These back in the days when it was founded in the 1840s, the area was in need of more educated people for a few main professions: the ministers, lawyers and doctors, main ones, but there were also people that were in business and so on that benefited from an education here. So what this was designed to do was to provide training for those kind of people, and typical of a lot of colleges and institutes of higher education at that time, it was founded by a religious organization. Initially the Baptists, but later it was the Presbytery of this part of Ohio, these counties. I was going to say Ashland, but Ashland wasn't around back then, not until 1846. But it was founded, and so it was sponsored by them, and then the citizens of this area subscribed the funds to build this building. Its cornerstone was laid July 4th, 1845. Future President Rutherford Hayes was said to attend that ceremony. He was only 21 years old then, but later on and then it was finished and put into operation. And this was a institution that had up to, I think, 400 to 500 students at one time. It was a big enterprise for Hayesville, but then Hayesville was a much bigger town then, more than twice the size of what it is today. And not long after it was founded, they had that fateful vote where the new county was formed and Hayesville was going to be the county seat, or Ashland. They were both about the same size, but Ashland won by a few more votes. So now they're a city of 20,000 and this is a village of 400, but it's kind of how things go. But now there were other academies and schools around this area too. Savannah had one. Sure, go ahead. You can sit down too if you want to. And Mansfield had a female seminary, so on and so forth. And then later, of course, Ashland College, now Ashland University, was founded in 1878. So what happened here? This was a school under Reverend Saunders Diffendorf, which quickly grew to become a real educational center and aspired to be a college or university in terms of degrees and everything. And it was coeducational too in its early years, so it was one of the bigger schools. But then during the Civil War, the students and faculty went off to fight on the Union side, and the school was sort of neglected during that period. That was not that unusual in that age of Ohio. And then, by the way, Hayesville, having lost the status of gaining the county seat and then having lost the railroads, that was too hilly to go through this area. It was outflanked as far as the college goes because the Presbyterians awarded the charter to what became the College of Worcester. So Worcester took over this operation, and the college operated this as academy in this building to the College of Worcester for a while, hence the name Academy. And then there was a period of time, obviously this being miles from Worcester, right, that it was not very convenient for them, so they moved their academy closer to the college than at that time. But a lot of schools had academies. Denison, Oberlin, Kenyon, and so on. They had places to train people to enter their schools beforehand. And then another innovation was the 1851 Constitution of the state of Ohio, under which we're operating now. That set up a requirement for districts to provide high school level education to all students. That took some decades to achieve, but that was the start of that then, that movement toward public high schools and that, which was common at that time. So after failing to get other religious organizations to use this building and facilities for a new college, and by the way, there were two other buildings on the property too, a boys' dorm on that side and a women's dorm on the other side. Plus, many Hayesville citizens took in students for boarding and rooms that went here to the Institute. So Hayesville was sort of an educational center way back then. So it then became the Hayesville High School and operated as that until 1929, when the previous building was built at the west end of town. It was torn down earlier last year, right? Yeah. So, and then after that, it became home to some social organizations and then was abandoned for years. Attempts were made at resurrection, and then I bought it in 2011, and it took a few years to renovate, and now it's my offices and residence. So that's sort of a quick story about the Vermillion Institute. Now, there are photographs showing it under renovation. There's some hanging there in the back corner. There are old photos of the Vermillion Institute and some other buildings along the walls. And so you might want to look at them and see other things too. So I think this will all be something good for you to learn a little bit more about education. Now, I got to say something about the Vermillion Institute. Beyond that too, it was home to a number of distinguished graduates, including a couple of U.S. senators, Atlee Pomerane, who was a Democratic senator from Ohio in the 1920s, and he led the Teapot Dome investigations under the scandal of the Harding administration, and was a well-known and respected public figure at that time. And then there was Senator Samuel Kirkwood, who later served as Iowa governor and the U.S. Secretary of Interior. He attended school here, later moved to Iowa. And then there were 4 U.S. congressmen who attended this institution. And some of the most famous alumni are, well, I guess we don't really know that much today, but they were influential. William Strong was the last mayor of New York before consolidation in 1898, and he was a reform mayor, reform candidate, and he was the one that gave Theodore Roosevelt his first political job that catapulted him to the presidency several years later. It was a surprise. But, and then there was William Cowan, who was president of the Baltimore, Ohio Railroad, which was one of the nation's biggest commercial enterprises at that time. And there were individuals who went on to found other institutions. Edward Fox, who founded the Capital College of Elocution in Columbus, later Capital University. And then Samuel Lay, who founded Ohio Northern University, was first president for 25 years. He came from here. And then John Simpson, who was Mansfield's most distinguished educator, and they named a school after him, but it's been torn down now. And so there were a number of other famous graduates of the school. And it had a reputation. They had reunions here. You see a long panoramic shot that was taken about 1916 of one of the homecoming days that was held here at the Vermillion Institute. And so it was it had real significance. Now, the building was in very bad shape because it had been abandoned. In fact, the Cleveland newspaper wrote a story about it saying in 1945 they're all abandoned, ghost-like, windows open and so on and so forth. And so it had deteriorated, and by the time I got it, the only thing that we could do was to rebuild the whole structure of the building. So that's what you can see in some of the photos. And this table some of you are sitting on is made of the original chestnut, wormy chestnut that was the structure of the beams in that. We saved almost all of it, and I ended up selling some of it for reuse on other buildings, and then gave some to a friend of mine who built this table for me too, so that was great. Todd Miller, he teaches 8th grade. He brings the 8th grade students here every year, and every year, and well, we'll see how that goes now. This year, the 3rd grade classes come here to see the place too. They used to walk from the west end of town, but I suppose it's too long a walk, but maybe they'll take a bus into the spring now from the new school. So we'll see about that, because it's great for younger people to learn more about their history, because this was a distinguished history. Now, Ozias Long, who designed the building, also designed the old Ashland County Courthouse, which is no longer here. But he later went on to Chicago and became a well-known architect, although most of his buildings were destroyed in the 1871 Great Fire in Chicago and that. So, but Ashland County also had a distinguished architect, George W. Kramer, who designed a number of the churches. Unfortunately, most of them in Ashland have been torn down, but Loudonville has a few of them. And he later went on to write a book about church design and designed churches all over the Midwest and the eastern United States. So it was a great career that way too. So now let's see. I'm trying to think of other points about it. I told you about this being religiously affiliated to help train people for the ministry, just as, like I said, Oberlin was Congregational, Ohio Wesleyan, Methodist, Kenyon, Episcopal, and of course Worcester that took it over. It's Presbyterian affiliated still, and Ashland was Brethren affiliated. So we had a number of them, different religions in that here. Now, one of the things I thought was interesting about the charter, it said it will not favor any Christian religion over the others, so I'm not sure what that meant, but that was in the state charter they got. And, oh yeah, there were also a couple of famous people. Well, Sanders Diffendorf, who was the first principal here, he later went out to Nebraska and founded a school out there. I haven't been able to learn that much about it, but it probably didn't survive as much as this one did either. But Ralph Diffendorfer from Hayesville was co-founder of the International Christian University in Japan, and there's Diffendorfer Hall named after him. That's still a big going institution. It was founded in the post-war years of occupation. And so let's see, and I think they also, well, there's a bunch of notable graduates. We have a page on Facebook that you can like. We have a couple of open houses here twice a year in the summer or around the holidays, and everyone's welcome to those, and we get a good turnout, which is nice. I mean, they have people come and see the place and everything. That's always great, and there may be some future preservationists, you never know. So But people remembered. It was kind of funny, and we had some high school students over a couple years ago, and son said, "Yeah, I came here in 3rd grade when he was in the class." So interesting how that works out. So, well, I'm not sure let's see what else to say about it. It was a lot of work to do the rehabilitation. We had to replace the wood structure with steel, but this is what you see is basically what was here. Now, this room was the chapel of the Vermillion Institute, and the 2nd floor is laid out with pretty much like it is now, except it's got a kitchen in it, so on and so forth. And then the 3rd floor was literary society rooms that people formed voluntarily, and then they shared written documents, printed things, and had various events and activities. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the history of the Vermillion Institute was lost in the 1901 fire at the College of Worcester because they had a lot of the records of it. They still have a few, and Ashland University and their former archivist, Dave Repke, they had a lot to share too, so we've gotten some stuff from him and so on. Different books and other things that talk about the Vermillion Institute and so on. And there are plenty of old photos around still of the place and so on. So, and it's great. Now, by the way, too, the building was rehabilitated using federal and state preservation incentives. The state offers a tax credit for, a refundable tax credit for renovation, and that helped pay about 1/4 of the cost of renovating it. And the federal credit I took as a deduction from my other income.